Hello there and welcome to World News Program. I'm your host Karim Zachary and these are today's top stories. Palestinian Ministry of Health announced on Friday the death of 2 teenagers killed by Zionist forces in the occupied West Bank, and many were left injured. The Kerch Bridge from Russia to Crimea has been hit by a huge explosion. And EU leaders met in Prague for an informal gathering where the current energy crisis Europe is facing dominated the talks. Hello again and welcome to the program. Fast in our news, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas emphasized the importance of the Arab Summit in Algiers, scheduled for the 1st and 2nd of November 2022. Mr. Abbas stressed the importance of the Arab Summit in Algiers in pushing the implementation of the resolution of previous Arab summits, mainly in relation to the support for the Palestinian cause. Still with Palestine, but this time in Palestine precisely, where Palestinian Ministry of Health announced on Friday the death of 2 teenagers killed by Zionist forces in the occupied West Bank, and many were left injured. One of the teenagers, Adel Ibrahim Daoud, who was aged 14, was shot in the city of Kalklia in the northern West Bank, while the other youth was killed in the village of Al-Mazra'a Al-Gharbiyah near Ramallah. The Kerch Bridge from Russia to Crimea has been hit by a huge explosion. Footage from the bridge showed a furiously burning fire engulfing at least 2 railway carriages from a train on the bridge, accompanied by a vast column of black smoke. And one of the parallel road bridge collapsed into the Kerch Strait. Immediately following the incident, Moscow has opened a criminal probe into the blast. The Speaker of Russia's lower house of parliament, the Duma, called the incident an act of war. Meanwhile, Ukraine has claimed responsibility for the attack, with a top aide to President Vladimir Zelensky warning it was just the beginning.
The main investigation department of the Russian Investigative Committee has opened a criminal case about the incident at the Crimean Bridge. According to the preliminary information, this morning a truck was blown up on the automobile part of the Crimean Bridge from the Taman Peninsula, which led to the ignition of 7 fuel tanks of a train traveling toward the Crimean Peninsula. As a result, 2 car roads of the bridge partially collapsed.
Ukrainian army reportedly regained control of nearly 2,500 square kilometers of territory from Russian forces during their counteroffensive launched late September. Hossam Burke.
Kyiv's counteroffensive continues. In recent days, Ukraine has been trying to regain territory in the Kharkiv region, in the northeast, but also in the south, near Kherson, a city under Russian control. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky assured Friday night that in the last offensive of the Ukrainian army, almost 25,000 square kilometers of territory invaded by Russians since February, as well as 96 localities were liberated.
During this week alone, our warriors liberated 776 square kilometers of territories in the east of our country from the Russian pseudo-referendum. 29 settlements, including 6 in Luhansk region. Overall, from the beginning of this advance, 2,434 square kilometers of our land and 96 settlements have already been liberated.
In turn, the UN delivered urgently needed aid to people living in recently recaptured areas of northeastern Ukraine. More than 73,000 people in Kharkiv Oblast have now received food assistance.
More than 73,000 people, and that's nearly half of the population in the retaken areas in Kharkivska Oblast, have received food assistance. We've also distributed 12,000 hygiene kits and kitchen sets, solar lamps, and blankets to 15,000 people.
witnesses of Russian occupation in the village of Borova, taken over by Ukrainian forces on October 3rd, came to collect the UN food aid package.
It's the first time I've used humanitarian aid. I went outside and it's quiet. At the time we weren't taking humanitarian aid because people didn't want to go out.
Intense shelling is heard in Bakhmut, a city of 70,000 inhabitants. If captured, it would be a victory for Moscow after weeks of defeats from north to south in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces still control Bakhmut, but fears of an infiltration by Russian forces on the eastern bank, including mercenaries from the Wagner company, are very real.
The Ukrainian authorities have denounced the discovery of a mass grave with some 180 corpses in the city of Liman, which thus joins Bucha, Izium, and Mariupol. All of them towns where Kiev has reportedly discovered graves of civilians after the expulsion of Russian troops. EU Vice President Margareta Schina suggested that Serbia's reluctance to support EU sanctions against Russia could threaten the country's ambition to join the European Union, while speaking to Euronews Serbia in Belgrade on Friday. Amid mounting pressure from Brussels, Serbia could be forced to pick a side away from its traditional position of neutrality when it comes to NATO and Moscow. The European Commission is expected to publish a report on Serbia's EU enlargement process next week, after it raised serious concerns over Serbia's recent foreign policy consultations with Russia, despite calls from Brussels to cut ties with Moscow.
Serbia.
There is a sensitivity, I will not hide, that in these difficult moments where many people within the European Union suffer from the consequences of this irrational, illegal war in Ukraine, that many people and many leaders are looking around and they expect everybody to share the communality of the project in these difficult moments, and in particular those who aspire to be with us.
Following the European political meeting, EU leaders met in Prague for an informal gathering where the current energy crisis Europe is facing dominated the talks. Nabil Khazini reports.
While no decisions were expected, there were hopes that the informal discussions between EU leaders in Prague might lead to progress on the energy crisis. But as winter approaches, the pressure mounts, and European leaders still struggle to bridge differences over natural gas price cap.
We have to keep our single market together, and we have to avoid fragmentation. I emphasize once again how crucial that is, and this is an opinion that was widely shared.
Some ideas on the table were those such as grouped energy purchases or a cap on gas prices. A full day of talks in Prague's ornate royal castle seemed to bring EU leaders no closer to deciding on whether or how to cap gas prices.
We are discussing the gas price cap on the forum of the European Council, including, of course, Chancellor Scholz, and there are more and more voices around the table in favor of imposing a gas price cap as quickly as possible.
The general agreement in the meeting is that if it works, it works. We should not work with ideological positions. But we have to prevent measures which will increase the gas price.
Energy experts warn that any sort of price cap would put an end to the price signals that govern the free market and force governments to negotiate over the allocation of supplies, possibly through rationing plans. In addition to tackling the energy crisis, European leaders also pledged on Friday to protect the critical infrastructure following gas leaks from Nord Stream pipelines.
The OPEC Plus meeting or organization's decision this week to cut oil production despite stiff U.S. opposition has further strained already tense relations between President Joe Biden's White House and Saudi Arabia's royal family. The United States is reviewing various options regarding its relationship with Saudi Arabia after Riyadh and other OPEC Plus nations agreed this week to large cuts in oil production. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said,
As to the relationship going forward, we're reviewing a number of response options. We're consulting closely with Congress. We will not do anything that would infringe on our interests. That's first and foremost what will guide us, and we will keep all of those interests in mind and consult closely with all of the relevant stakeholders as we decide on any steps going forward.
American ministers of foreign affairs on Friday discussed the security and humanitarian crisis in Haiti. Secretary General of Brazilian Foreign Affairs Ministry Fernando Silva said the situation in Haiti is not concerning and has deteriorated to a worrying and serious point. Let's take a listen.
Despite the efforts made by the international community through the last decades, for which Brazil and others have substantially contributed to Haiti, it has not only degraded, but is now worrying. The deterioration of its security condition imposes an urgent challenge that risks the odds of the Haitian people.
The King and Queen of Thailand visited a hospital in the northeast of the country on Friday to meet the relatives of the victims of the daycare center where the mass shooting took place, leaving more than 35 people dead, including children. The King reassured the victims' families and pledged to facilitate and provide all help needed.
If you need anything, we will facilitate and provide help. I would like to extend my condolences. There are no other words to describe this feeling. I want to give you all moral support to be strong, so that the souls of those children can have a sense of relief that their families will remain strong and be able to move forward.
Japan and the United States are conducting a joint military drill involving U.S. aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan in areas around Japan in light of North Korea's repeated missile launches, according to Japan's defense ministry. The bilateral exercise, in which the Japanese destroyer is also participating, has been underway since October 1st. A ministry announcement said it did not say when it is scheduled to end, however. The Biden administration published a comprehensive set of export controls on Friday, greatly extending its reach in an effort to halt Beijing's technological and military advancement. One such measure barred China from obtaining specific semiconductor chips produced anywhere in the world using American machinery.
In order to maintain the hegemony of science and technology, the United States abused export control measures and maliciously blocked and suppressed Chinese enterprises. This approach deviates from the principle of fair competition and violates international economic and trade rules. It not only harms the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese enterprises, but also affects the rights and interests of American companies.
Canada moved on Friday to institute bans on over 10,000 senior leaders in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, including the Quds Force, for an ongoing brutal crackdown on mass protests. Sofian Kanturi reports.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new sanctions against the Iranian government, including a permanent ban on entry for thousands of people connected to the regime, including the top officials of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps.
For years, we've been condemning Iran's support for terrorism and destabilizing behavior in the region, including by declaring it a state sponsor of terrorism. This list includes top military leadership, like those of the IRGC, Quds Force, and intelligence agencies, those directly responsible for the brutality and crimes.
Additionally, according to Trudeau's announcement, Ottawa will establish new sanctions office and set aside more than $76 million to carry out the sanctions.
We will accelerate the work to ensure that our agencies have the resources necessary to do the job. Therefore, today, we're announcing $76 million to strengthen Canada's overall capacity to implement sanctions.
Earlier this week, Canada imposed a round of sanctions on Iran for the so-called human rights violations, including the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old from Iranian Kurdistan who died in custody of Iran's morality police.
The The school authorities of Uvalde, Texas, where 19 children and 2 teachers died in a shooting last May, decided this Friday to suspend their entire police force in the said district. The shooting at Robb Elementary School has sparked a wave of criticism for a lack of swift action and coordination by school police, state troopers, and other officers who responded to the shooting. India's drugs regulators have ordered an investigation into the alleged contamination of cough syrup produced by Maiden Pharmaceuticals that the World Health Organization has linked to the death of 66 children in the Gambia, according to the Health Ministry. Indian media reported Haryana state authorities were conducting raids at various premises at Maiden Pharmaceuticals. The WHO this week said laboratory analysis of 4 Maiden products and confirmed unacceptable amounts of diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol, which can be toxic and lead to acute kidney injury.
The Central Government's Health Secretary and Pharmaceutical Secretary have talked to our Health Secretary. It has been decided that before taking any action, we will first send its samples and check them. The samples have been sent to the Central Drug Laboratory in Calcutta. After the reports comes in, and if there is something wrong, then we will take strict action.
Brazil's leftist presidential candidate Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro restarted on Friday the electoral campaign on radio and television ahead of the second round of elections on October 30th. Former President and candidate Lula led a mass rally in São Paulo on Friday morning as Bolsonaro met with a group of children at the presidential palace in Brasilia.
This visit to Guarulhos market is to sell you the idea that we will win the elections on October 13th and start recovering this country. We have to get him out of there and put someone who likes the people and likes men, women, children and workers. Aha, comrades, and until the victory, God willing.
Turkey's parliament, known as the Grand National Assembly, started discussing a draft bill and is set to finish voting this week. According to reports, the bill includes amendments to press and internet laws and the penal code, and if approved, will criminalize the act of spreading false information. And for more international news, let's follow this roundup by Marwa Belayer.
Russia's investigative committee said on Saturday 3 people have been found dead so far as the result of a truck explosion on a bridge linking Russia to Crimea. It also said that the investigators have also established the details of the truck and its owner, registered in Russia's southern Krasnodar region, and begun searching his place of residence. People in Mexico have been struggling to make ends meet as the country is trying to contain inflation, which has reached its highest level in more than 20 years. Amid a worldwide cost of living crisis, inflation in Mexico hit 8.8% last month. Now the country is feeling the squeeze. At least 9 people have died after an explosion at a petrol station in the Irish country of Donegal. Irish police said on Saturday, with search and recovery efforts continuing. The explosion happened shortly after 3 p.m. local time at the Applegreen petrol station on the outskirts of the village of Chrislot. Police said earlier on Saturday that 8 more people were receiving treatment in hospital, but they have not addressed the cause of the explosion. Thousands of travelers remained stranded Friday in Nigeria's north-central Kaji state after major connecting roads to other parts of the West African nation were submerged amid the country's worst flooding in a decade. The floods have killed 7 people whose homes were swept away in the state's Ibaji Council area, the Kaji Commissioner for Information said. Authorities have struggled to evacuate residents in affected areas.
Liverpool will host the 67th Eurovision Song Contest on behalf of this year's winners, Ukraine, due to the ongoing conflict there. Liverpool edged out the other candidate, Glasgow, as host city in a draw held live on BBC television on Friday. Many Muslim people from different parts around the world celebrate the birth of Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him. Colorful parades, lights and fireworks marked the celebrations. Islam Said tells us more.
Muslim countries across the world celebrate Mawlid al-Nabawi Sharif, the birth anniversary of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Thousands of Muslims, including Algeria, Palestine, Iraq and Yemen, gather with their families. Streets and mosques decorated with colorful lights and fireworks displayed as part of the celebrations. On this occasion, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune took part of the celebrations of Al-Mawlid Nabawi Sharif, where he congratulated the Algerian people through his official Twitter account.
By the precious occasion, the birth of the best creation Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, I pray to Allah, the Almighty, to bestow upon our beloved country and people and make the path of our Prophet the light of our hearts to serve our religion and nation.
The day is a public holiday in many Muslim countries. During gatherings, stories from the life of the Prophet are told. Some traditional bands perform traditional songs to mark the occasion.
We
are happy this year celebrating this ceremony, which is the celebration of the birth of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. In this place for the first time at Al Wasl Dome in Expo Dubai. The ambiences are good, it is spiritual, and we hope it will continue without any interruption.
It means a lot because being a religious guy, I know because it means a lot. Prophet Muhammad's day means it's like our own birthday. Yeah, we are so much indebted to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
However, it is not marked everywhere in the Islamic world, where some Muslim countries such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar, where more conservative teachings are followed, celebrating Mawlid is forbidden. Mawlid is derived from the Arabic word birth. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a righteous man chosen by God to carry out and recite his message to mankind as his last messenger.
All right, time for a reminder of our top stories for today. Palestinian Ministry of Health announced on Friday the death of 2 teenagers killed by Zionist forces in the occupied West Bank, where many were left injured. The Kerch Bridge from Russia to Crimea has been hit by a huge explosion. And EU leaders met in Prague for an informal gathering where the current energy crisis Europe is facing dominated the talks. And with this, the program comes to an end. Thank you for keeping it here on our channel. For more stories, don't forget to visit our social media platforms and our website. That's it for now. Bye-bye.